This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Rick Cheatham, and we're going to talk to him about his story as a marriage coach, transformational speaker, and fire captain. So welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
So we always like to ask a couple questions before we get to the heart of your story. Any guest that comes on the show, we ask them, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me is seeing marriages thrive. Because when marriages thrives, the next generation, the children that are brought into that core nucleus family, when they are healthy and they are adapted, that comes from a marriage that is strong and is pouring into the next generation. Yeah. Because I've been through my own personal battles with my marriage, and I've seen the outcome of that, it motivates me now to help others get through that journey I was on, and condense some time so they don't have to suffer as long.
Yeah, I think it's great when you can take things that happen to you, lessons learned in your life, and then kind of pay it forward as a mentor, as a coach,
Right.
as somebody that an advisor. And that seems to be a space that a lot of people are starting to discover that everyone's story can have an impact on somebody else's life.
That's exactly right.
So being a firefighter, I don't know if you want to start like with that background or start where you are now, or you're doing all of this in the same space, right? You're still a firefighter?
No, I retired be 5 years,
5 years.
in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you want to talk about that part of your life and how you came to this point? Or
the firefighting side of my life, if you will, was just merely I was posed a question probably 35 years ago that said something to this effect: if you can find a job that you love and you have passion for, you will never work a day in your life. So what I had a passion and a drive for is I always wanted to be a fireman. I grew up in Southern California back in the 70s, and it was the era of the Johnny and Roy days of Emergency Squad 51, and that just lit a fire under me, and that's what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, as I got older, I got into some mischievous dealings and kind of tainted my ability to get hired because of I ended up getting a DUI. I had some issues with my temper back then as a young man, and so because of some legal issues, I just figured I would never become a fireman. So it was about the age of 28 or so that I decided I was going to follow and pursue that career, primarily because I had let a lot of time go under the bridge, so to speak, and I had created a different track record for myself. So then I had about this 7 to 10 year window where I turned my life around. I'd gotten married, I'd started raising children, and that's when I started to pursue the fire service once again, because I figured I do have a background, but I've changed that and I have a new track record. And so that's what propelled me into the fire service. I didn't start my career in the fire service until I was 34 is when I got hired.
Oh, wow.
And I spent 25 years in the fire service and then retired during the COVID pandemic. The city that I worked for, which was in Anaheim, California, they offered me a golden handshake, if you will. And I took that golden handshake and moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where I retired. And that was November of 2020.
So when did you pivot to being a marriage coach and transformational speaker? Was that like some?
Well, that's a good question. My story because of my marriage is what caused me to pivot into that space again. My wife and I met. Well, we've been married nearly 40 years. We just celebrated our 39th anniversary. And so now we're into our 40th season. That's what I tell everybody. I'm in my 40th season of marriage. And, I prayed for my wife. I wanted a woman that was 5'1" to 5'2", 103 to 106 pounds or 5 pounds. And I wanted her long black hair, dark complexion. When she walked into a room, every head turned. I wanted her classy. And I was very descriptive of what kind of woman I wanted her to look like. So it was all physical appearance. But then at the end of that, I kind of felt guilty that it was a very carnal minded or physical minded. But hey, I'm a man and I needed to know that, hey, this is the woman I want. I need her to look this way so that when I saw her, it would be like, oh, okay, that might be the woman that you were praying about. So, but I ended the prayer with something like this. And most importantly, I pray that she will help me become the man of God you want me to be. And I had no idea what that meant. So now take that, for instance, I got 10 years under my belt in marriage. She was my answered prayer. She was exactly the description that I prayed for. And then in 10 years, I took that answered prayer to the point where she hated me, God, the church, and she said, I quit. She was out the door with 2 small boys under 5, and my world turned upside down. And that started me on a journey of how to earn my wife's trust back. But the problem with earning my wife's trust back is I had broken her heart so terribly because I had a sexual addiction. So I was a serial betrayer. And that's what destroyed her heart. And as you can imagine, I mean, anybody listening to this podcast can imagine when you've been betrayed at that level, there's a pain, there's a hurt, there's a brokenness that is very difficult to overcome. And so because I felt I caused it, which I did everything I could to then restore, rebuild, and remake our marriage from the ground up. It took me another 10 years to earn her trust back. But once I earned her trust back, we began a journey that was transformational in the lives of other men who were struggling with sexual addiction. So we started working with couples. Me primarily, I started working with men who were struggling with sexual addiction. Then my wife would help the wives that were dealing with that. And we found that it was so difficult to overcome, for the wife to overcome the betrayal, that we really had to focus in on trying to help women understand that the addiction is not about them. The addiction has nothing to do with who they are. The addiction is all about men covering their pain with something that soothes them and gives them an artificial feeling of love and acceptance. And that's what pornography does for most men. It's an endorphin run. It's a cortisol rush. It's all the chemicals that are released in the brain that give you the soothing atmosphere that your trauma from your past is needing. It's needing some way of coping and overcoming. So the reality of addiction is it's not really the addiction that's the problem. It's the mindset that caused the addiction, the mindset that you're not good enough, you're not worthy. And when you make choices from that position of your mind, you end up doing things that bring about guilt and shame and that pile on that unworthy aspect of who you are. So we started working primarily with the men then, trying to change their behavior. And 5 years into it, we were having tremendous success. In fact, the church we were attending at the time called on us, and we were the ones that were helping what they call the marriages in 911 crisis. So we would get phone calls from couples at all hours of the morning or night, with trauma, and they were leaving. And so we poured a lot of our efforts into volunteering our time, our efforts in saving these marriages. And then we ended up getting the knock on the door that every parent dreads. And that was the Riverside County Sheriff's Department came to our house at 4 a.m. on December 18th, 2013 and informed us that our oldest son had been murdered that night.
Oh,
And
wow.
that caused us to just go down. We had to pivot. I mean, we pivoted to a totally different direction. It seemed like, marriages were no longer important to me. What was
Mm,
important to me was saving my family through the cycle of grief that we were about to go after hearing such, terrible news. And so we put aside everything that we were doing with families and counseling and coaching and marriage, and we just went on it's been 11 years now. We just went on an 11-year journey of learning how to deal with grief and learning how to process loss and pain and suffering. And one of the things I pulled my family together with when this first happened, I said, I asked them all, we're about ready to go through the crucible of life, having to deal with this grief, but I want you all to sit here with me right now. Everyone in this family, promise me we will not allow this to tear us apart. And we all promised that we wouldn't allow it to tear us apart. And so we processed it the best we could. We walked through it the best we could. We had a lot of missteps. We had a lot of anger and bitterness and resentment come out. And we've been processing that. Now, in the process of dealing with that grief, 7 years after my son died, I was given the opportunity to retire, move to Nashville, Tennessee, where I currently reside. And 5 months after retirement, I fell and broke my neck and was paralyzed from the chest down, had to learn how to walk again, had to learn how to care for myself and become independent. 3 months in the hospital. And when it first happened, my therapist asked me in the hospital, what do you want to accomplish while you're here in therapy? And at the time, people were thinking, man, if he could ever get to a place where he could get into a wheelchair by himself, that would be a huge success. And my thoughts were, I don't want to be in a wheelchair, so
mm,
I need to learn how to walk. And my goal was I was going to walk out of the hospital. So my therapist said, well, let's get to work. So for 3 months, we went to work at every day, 5 days a week. And then I started to ask for weekends. So they would even come to me on weekends. So I was literally in therapy uh, 4 to 5 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, learning how to walk, learning how to function and move forward. The beauty about that was that my wife, who is a nurse, and she was an ICU nurse,
mm,
she had a very good understanding of how to create an environment for healing,
mm.
an environment for a good mindset through music, of all things, of course.
Yeah.
The vibrations of the music and the sounds and the specifics behind it all were all designed to help my internal vibration, if you will, seek that plane where healing was going to be the most profitable. And then on top of all that, I had all my firefighter buddies from California were flying out and staying with me at my house and at the hospital, helping my family get through this transition. So the love and support that I had while I was in the hospital created an environment that was just tremendous for growth, for healing, and for mindset. But then when I got home, everything went back to normal. My wife had to go back to work. My friends all had to go back to work and go back. So then I was just left by myself uh,
Mm,
to really think about what was going on. And I had a lot of deficits. My hands were not working properly. I couldn't feel things. I couldn't walk properly. I kept losing my balance and bumping into things. I'd have bruises all over my arms. And it was really discouraging in the early phases of it. And as it became more and more discouraging, I started focusing more and more on my deficits rather than my abilities to be able to overcome. And it
mm,
just threw me in a terrible, terrible cycle of depression, anxiety, worry. Uh, I lost my identity as a man. I felt useless. I felt uh, like somehow I had done something to deserve this
mm,
punishment, if you will. And it just brought me into a dark cycle of just depression, to the point where I felt like I was useless as a man. And
mm.
feeling useless as a man, coming from everything that I'd already been through, walking through the addictive cycle with my wife, rebuilding the trust in our marriage, burying our oldest son to just a horrific murder, and then breaking my neck 5 months after retirement, started me thinking that maybe I had done something that was deserving of this type of punishment.
Mm.
And it really threw me in a bad place. And I ended up listening to a young man at a conference that I was attending that spoke on the possibilities of changing your mindset. And so we walked through a process of, establishing what is the emotional makeup that you carry with you as a state of being. And after going through that process, my emotional state of being was showing up useless as a man. So as a useless man, that was my being. That's how I was showing up. And I attributed my uselessness to the way that my body responded when my mind said, hey, I want you to pick this up. Well, I'd go to pick it up, but I couldn't feel it with my hand, and I would drop it. And I was breaking things. I was spilling things. My body had a very weird awareness of its spatial presence. So I would bump into things, and it became just a mindset of being victimized by my circumstances. So I felt like I was the victim of either poor choices in the past or just bad luck, one of the two. So after speaking with this young man, he asked me, he said, do you think I'm useless? And I said, of course not. And he said, well, I was just curious because you seem to put a lot of value on your body functioning as it once did. And because it doesn't function that way, you feel useless. Now, mind you, I was speaking to a man who had no legs and one arm, and he was confronting me with my pitiful victim state of feeling useless because I just couldn't use my hands the way I used to be able to use them. I couldn't walk the way I used to be able to walk. Although I have a fully intact body, I felt useless. And so Nick, his name was Nick Santonastasso, he ends up confronting me with this, and it was a light bulb moment. And it started me on a journey of personal development again and the awakening of the spirit within to find purpose and meaning in the circumstances of life, which I call the crucible of life. And so it's overcoming the adversities, the challenges, and the traumas of life by understanding its purpose in your life. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you. It's an opportunity for growth and expansion, not one for deficits and retractions, if you will. So that started me on a journey of personal development. And through that personal development space and journey, I've been able to now take all of that experience, all of those lessons learned, all of those adversities, and bring them down into a very easy, digestible program that I refer to as AIM, AIM. So AIM for life, aim for the marriage, aim for the family, aim for whatever it is you want in life. If you take these 3 easy principles, it will guarantee a transitional leap into your mindset. And it starts with A being, first of all, we have to become aware of how our mind works. And when we become aware of how things work in the mind, we then learn that we must take absolute 100% responsibility for the way we perceive our reality to be. And once we understand that perception is in the mind, we can then pivot to, okay, how can I change how I currently perceive my situation to how can I capture the gold nuggets in this situation so that I can learn from them, become better than I was today in the future, and then capitalize on that with momentum to keep changing my mindset to become more of a vibrational frequency of positive polarity rather than one of negative polarity. And that started me down that journey. Absolute responsibility for where I am in life and taking responsibility for how I'm interpreting life. And then that sets you up for the I, which is to then take intention with intention, make the choices in the present moment to change your paradigm and have that shift. And then that third equation to that is the meaningful meditation or meaningful mind shift that happens after you have the intention of making a different decision in the present moment. See, our minds are a meaning making machine. We make meaning of everything our senses bring in from the outside. So it would appear that everything is happening from the outside in, when in reality, the shifting takes place when you realize that everything happens from within, and then we manifest our life
Yeah.
outside. So we are all living a manifestation of our thoughts. And the biblical principle is do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And the renewing of your mind means you have to get over the mindset of fear into the mindset of faith. And the mindset of fear is always looking in the rearview mirror of all of our negative experiences that we've had, and we've made meaning of them at the negative polarity of life, and the emotions that are contributed to that cause us to then show up as that person in life. So for me, I was showing up as a useless man. So a useless man to a wife is not a very good place to be. And that caused my wife to hold me accountable to that and change that paradigm. So the mind shift is we either are looking through the lens of fear in life and making choices, or we're looking through the lens of faith and making choices. But either way, we all have one thing in common. We have the present moment. That's the only thing we can control to make that change, to make that decision. And I just started to make decisions based off of my future rather than make decisions based off of my past. And that ended up to where I am today, teaching men how to transform their minds out of the pit of conformity and fear and into the beautiful realm of anticipating the life you want to create. And you have the power to do that.
Yeah, it's real important to have that be able to manifest like what's going on, because like so much of your brain is running on a subconscious track.
That's exactly right.
There's like they're saying like 5% is conscious and 95 is subconscious. So a lot of people don't know how to activate their subconscious or to retrain that focus, because it's kind of going on automatic unless you take the, like, an athlete, a musician, we put 10,000 hours into what we learn how to do and get muscle memory.
That's
You know,
exactly right. Yep.
uh,
Same thing with the mind.
yeah,
It's
it's
all
like
muscle memory.
a lot of people don't focus on that. If
Yep.
you start to look at different philosophies, I spent some time in Japan, and just the mindset was really important in the culture in terms of like being able to focus and to manifest things by believing in it, and like out taking something inside and actually verbalizing it, like visualizing it,
Mm-hmm.
making it something that's possible rather than being scared. And a lot of people stay in something that's very toxic because they know it. And if you know it,
Familiar.
yeah, they're comfortable. Well, they're comfortable with their discomfort, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to deal with the unexpected or the unknown, because that's even more uncomfortable.
Yeah, change is scary. It's unfamiliar, and so we have a tendency to want to stay in whatever area we feel comfortable in, and sometimes we feel comfortable in discomfort,
Yeah,
and we stay stuck in that mentality. And to me, I call that the victim mindset.
it's like a bad
It's
movie.
very easy to point the finger of blame and say, this is what's happening to me. And then that transitions me to the next part of what really caused me to reflect on my own life was uh, when the man murdered my son, I said the words that I could forgive him. Those words came out of my mouth, even in court. I said I forgave him. But just because I said something doesn't really mean that I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized is those were just empty words. And I started to auger in with anger and bitterness and resentment. And I was justified to hold on to those things because, after all, the man murdered my son. And so I have every right to live in this mindset of anger and resentment for what he has done to me and my family. And as I augured in on that belief system, I felt more and more out of control, more and more stuck. I felt life was just hurling around me, and I just didn't even know how to deal. I mean, everything. I was showing up everywhere, angry, bitter, resentful. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. I just got to the place where I couldn't do it. It was either I was going to put a bullet in my head and end it. And that, don't believe me, that thought came to my head after I broke my neck, or I had to figure out how to pivot around this. So what I discovered in this journey was that we all have a tendency to hold on to some resentments for things that have happened to us in the past. And a lot of it is justifiable. So we think, so we believe. I mean, when you look at what people have had done to them, it's easy to say that's not fair and become victimized by it. So this man killed my son in a brutal, brutal fashion. And I had to learn how to overcome that bitterness and resentment. And the only thing I could find was this. There was a passage, in the scripture that talks about Jesus as he hung on a cross for the sins of mankind. And what he said was, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And that's when it dawned on me that I'm either going to have to learn how to love the unforgivable, or I'm going to be miserable in my life.
Yeah.
And then the next step went to, well, shoot, Rick, wait a minute. You are that unforgivable person. You betrayed your wife with hookers, prostitutes, strip clubs, pornography, you name it, you betrayed her. You were the unforgivable in her life, and she forgave you. Not only did she forgive you, but God forgave you. So for you to hold on to resentment and think that you're justified to do so is really nothing more than a hypocritical approach to life, where you start blaming others for the very thing you do. Now, yeah, I didn't murder anybody, but when you look at what betrayal does to the heart of your spouse, you might as well have, because it was really us trying to resurrect a dead marriage because of what I had done. So in a lot of ways, I killed my marriage and I killed my wife's spirit, and I had to resurrect that. And the only way that was possible was her creating the environment where grace and mercy and forgiveness showed up. So I had to do that in my own life. I'm sure there's many on this podcast right now that have things that have happened to them in their lives. And like me, they can easily justify being a victim of that and auguring into the negative polarity of life and become bitter and resentful towards other people and what they've done. And I'm here today as a man who's not only has walked through those dark shadows of life, but have also come out on the other side, knowing and understanding the power that forgiveness has. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with what they've done, but you have to go in and change the meaning that you have around that event. So the event of my son being murdered, I had a meaning that this man stole and betrayed my family and robbed us of not only our son, but of an entire legacy of our family tree, a branch that will never produce ever again. So we lost an entire lineage of our family tree. And I felt like that was a betrayal at the highest level. And then going back and reframing that, what I realized was that man was suffering inside and thought, for whatever reason, taking my son's life and then stealing all that he had was going to somehow make him a better person. What a sad reality that is, a sad existence. Now, because of that choice that he made in the present moment where he lived in fear, he now gets to spend the rest of his life in prison. What a sad state of an affair. So I had to retrain my mind to think differently about the event and then take it to another level and say, okay, what can I learn about myself in this environment, in this event, in this experience? And what I learned was I had the ability to hold on to grudges that would destroy not only my life, but the lives of those that I showed up for, especially my family, until I was able to let that venom out, forgive the man for what he did, and just say, you know, there's a lesson in this. And my lesson was learning how to forgive. But there was also more gold in that experience than just that. It was recently brought to my attention. Somebody said something to this effect. What if your son's death was his gift for you? What if your son's death was his gift for you? Now think about that question for a minute. How many of us would ever think there's a gift in somebody's death? I mean, I know people would, man, I'm so glad that guy died. But that's not what I'm talking about. What if Michael made the choice?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he did because he had told his brother years before that he wasn't going to be here this long. He was only going to be in life for a short period of time. He knew it. He told us he knew it. So what if he knew this before even coming into this life and chose this life as a gift to set me free? And in setting me free from the bondage of religion, from the bondage of the lack of being able to forgive or an unforgiving heart, and free me from a heart that is built and harboring such resentment. What if he's died to set me free from all that? And then it started me to really look into this mind game, this mind shift of what if I could take his death and turn it into a gift? And that's been the journey of my life, is turning the most tragic event into a gift that now I'm able to deliver that gift to other people who suffer marriage issues, grief, or even traumatic injuries that could break their neck and leave them incapacitated, or at least with deficits that they now have to learn how to manage in life. So life becomes an adventure of finding the gifts in adversity. And when you can find the gift in adversity, your mind shift changes its focus. So instead of focusing, like you were talking about earlier, musicians, their focus for 10,000 hours is to master their instrument. So the same process for all of us. If we spend those hours on mastering our mindset, we can then shift and pivot and control every emotion that comes in and out of our consciousness. And when we can dial that up and change the polarity of our emotional plane from either positive to negative and negative to positive, if we have the control that we can turn it up, that means everybody outside of that can no longer control how we emotionally connect to our environments and our experiences. We control it. And that's where we have 100% absolute responsibility to control the dial of our emotional temperatures.
That's a real empowerment, because like if you get to a more expansive mindset rather than a narrow mindset. So if you had this mindset, well, things have to be perfect before I can do anything. And I run into a lot of people that get in that mindset, whether I'm a musician or I'm a software guy. And a lot of times you got to get to a point where you got to put something into the world. It might be not be 100%, but you have to be willing to kind of deal with, like in music, we have this idea, there's no bad note, there's an opportunity. If
Right.
you're playing like
That's beautiful.
if you're playing modal jazz and somebody plays a note that's unexpected, you don't stop the song. You adjust because you had your 10,000 hours of practice and say, well, I know what will go with that. Even though it wasn't planned, it's just like an athlete that was practicing all these plays and they see something they didn't expect. Are they just going to bomb out? Well, some of them will. Or are they actually going to be able to respond to that and not just freeze? That they have the ability to be able to pivot at the moment and be in the present and not be locked into everything they were practicing and not recognize what's going on now.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a
Well,
hard place to be because a lot of people like to be kind of phoning it in or have a set way to do something, and if there's something else comes along, they can't get out of it.
yeah.
They're locked in a loop.
Yeah. That behavioral loop is either going to be a negative loop or a positive loop. We get the choice. We get the choice in the present moment to determine what that's going to be. I love that analogy you use that, it's not a wrong note. It's just an opportunity. And
Yeah.
that's the power of focus. When where you place your focus, energy goes. So your energy is flowing wherever you put your focus. So there's a spiritual principle that as a man thinks, so is he. So whatever your thoughts are, you believe that. That's who you become. You become your thoughts. So the question is, who's controlling your thoughts?
Mm.
Is it you or is it your environment? Are you allowing the environment to dictate what you think and then how you feel? Because your thoughts create the ability to make a choice, and that choice creates a behavior, and that behavior then creates an experience that we get to have. And in that experience, there is emotion attached to it. And so the brain then now looks at the experience, attaches the emotion to it, and that's what creates our belief systems. It's the experience with the emotion equals a belief. And that belief system becomes so embedded because of habit, because we've done it 10,000, 20,000. In fact, we've done it our entire lives, is we've trained ourselves in the behavioral loop of being a victim, in the behavioral loop of life happening to me rather than for me, in the behavioral loop that I'll never amount to anything. I'm worthless. I'm hopeless. I'm judged. I'm being judged. Look at everybody around me. I'm a victim. Poor me. And you get to the place where you were like me, where you become useless. And when we can change that behavioral loop, and there's, the beauty about it is there's only two options. When we're in the middle of a choice, when we're in the middle of the present moment, there's only two options that we have. We either get to look at this through the lens, I like it as an opportunity, which means that you're looking at it through the lens of faith. Mm-hmm. Or you can look at it through the idea that who the heck just played that stinking note? That doesn't fit here. And then we can criticize and we can go out there and we can just really tell people how screwed up they are. Don't you know how to play? Where did you come up with that? And then boom. Well, that's called looking through the lens of fear. The fear of losing something, the fear of maybe my reputation is going to be tarnished, the fear of people are going to look at me and they're not going to think I'm good enough, or people are going to look at me and they're not going to appreciate me. So I got to do it just perfect. I got to do it. Well, that mindset of having to be perfect causes us to just sit and become stuck in our own fears.
You think you get stagnant.
You become stagnated. Yeah. And when you become stagnated, what you do is you're drawing on the past experiences and you're remembering the emotions that came with that. And you go, I don't ever want to go and feel that pain again. So I'm going to just try to avoid pain. I'm going to try to avoid those circumstances. And so your subconscious mind is always looking for a way to keep you safe. And in keeping you safe, it keeps you stuck.
You're locked in a box.
So now you're
thinking it's hard to do because like the box is more comfortable.
It's way more comfortable to be stuck in a box than it is to go, wow, man, the world is just I got everything's before I can do anything. Well, at that mindset shift, when you're looking at it through the lens of fear and you're always looking in the rearview mirror, what you create is doubt. So when you have a life that is created on the foundation of fear, you will produce doubt, and doubt will have the result of anxiety. It'll have the result of feeling stuck. It will have the result of stress. It will start producing all the stress hormones. Your body will go into what we call fight or flight, and you will either be ready to fight somebody, run from something, or you're going to sit and hide. So those three things are going to happen when you're in fear. And how do you know you're in fear? Well, just because of the results that you feel. If you feel stuck, if you feel anxious, if you feel worried, if you feel like life is happening to you, you're stuck in the fear cycle, and you're going to create more of that in your future, because you can't help but create what you think. And if you're thinking about the negative experience from the past, that's where your focus is. So where your focus goes, energy flows. So you're going to create energy around what you focused on, and that's your past and more of the missteps going in the future. But the gold in all this is that if you look through the mindset of faith, faith is anticipatory. It's looking into the future. It's not looking behind you. The past doesn't even exist. Doesn't even exist. There's no past. There's no place you can go that says, hey, there's the past. I'm going to the past. Check it out. This is the past. No, the past is only recorded in the memories of your mind. Your memory made meaning of the past, and then it registered and recorded it and filed it in the past. That happened back there. But it's always there. You can always call it up. You could always reflect on it. You can ruminate on it. You can think about it over and over, but it doesn't exist. You, me, made meaning of it in our minds, and we restored, we recorded it and filed it away. But faith, being anticipatory, it will always look for that which you can create. And so if you are creating something, you are no longer just a contributor to the old mindset. Now you are creating something out of nothing. Your mind creates, and then you take action on that creation by taking the step of faith. And when you do that, all of the anchors that you had in fear start to dwindle away, and it frees you to move forward with much more acceleration, much more passion, much more purpose, much more understanding, because you become empowered because of your faith rather than become disempowered from your fears. So the whole mind shift for me is the mind shift between looking at life through the lens of fear or faith. How will you know you're doing that? Because of the results that you get in your life. It's a cause and effect law. You can't change it. It's the sowing and the reaping spiritual principle. You can't change it. Whatever you sow, you will reap. Whatever you cause will have an effect. So just look at the results of your life. If you're not happy with the way your life is turning out, if you're pointing the finger of blame outside of yourself, you're going to get stuck at the wall of fear, the wall of shame, the wall of doubt. But you're better than that. Every person was born with a purpose. We are a 1 in 400 trillion chance to even be here in this life. And we beat everyone. We won. We were the ones that were born. So because the fact that we're here, that we breathe, that we have our existence is the result of us having a purpose. And every one of us have this. Every one of us have a story. Everyone on your podcast, they're all listening to this right now. And I can guarantee you they have had a story that will light up like a Christmas tree if they share that story in the event to help other, in the purpose of trying to help somebody else. We all have that story. We were all created with that power. We were all created with that in our DNA. But then we're born into this life, and because of the way we were brought up, we are programmed to have belief systems. We are programmed to either be limited by our beliefs or empowered by our beliefs. We are programmed on how to handle emotional trauma. We are programmed, sit down, shut up, be quiet, don't do that, don't do this. And we were programmed for the first 8 years of our lives on how we're going to respond for the rest of our lives. And that's that subconscious, that 95% you were talking about early, runs the program. So now as adults, what's really happening is we're running a program from the subconscious that was developed so many years before by people that programmed us just because that's the belief systems they had. It doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means that that's what they had to program us with. And so we carry that on. So I've dedicated my life to changing the program, changing.
Well, that's the thing. It's like in my life as a programmer, we can just wipe the memory bank, and and we can totally restructure the structural construct of whatever we're doing. So we go from one technology to the next, foundational changes. Back from I've dealt with mainframes. Now we're living in the AI world, blockchain world. So in my industry, you have to relearn the base. It exponentially changes so much that you can't just rely on what I learned in the 70s. Doesn't apply. What was in the 80s doesn't apply. 90s doesn't apply. 2000 doesn't apply. We're in a 2025, and it's a total structural change with AI. Got code that kind of writes itself. You can put a base, and then it will actually learn. And you're like, well, we never had anything like that. And we're trying to figure out, like, a lot of us, some of our old school programmers, they're like, oh, and they're scared of it. They're like, well, it's going to replace me. And I'm in a mindset where I'm working with a startup, and like we're finding ways to use it with our knowledge, and we're using it like a tool instead of it tooling us. Right?
It's interesting the way you just put that. You said a lot of your programmers are fearful that it's going to put them out of a job. So what lens do they look through when they're faced with that decision? The lens of fear. I'm going to lose my job. It's going to put me out of work. So when you're in that position, what do you think? What's your focus? Your focus is I'm losing my job. It's going to put me out of a career. But you took a different approach. How can I use this for the betterment of not only myself, but for the people I serve? And you use it with the anticipatory action that something in the future is going to be better, instead of dwelling on the fear of the past. I love the way you swung that. That was insightful. Well, I love it from the perspective of computer programming. That's pretty amazing.
Well, human beings still, like, we're the master of it. Like, we created the machine. The machine didn't create us. Right. So in my opinion, I'm always going to be kind of the master of the machine, and I'm not going to let the machine master me. And so there's a way to actually use it, and I understand what it can do, and I understand what I can do. So I look at, like, what's the limitation of a human being? What are the limitations of what I can do in terms of the speed at which I can do it, the amount of things I can do? But one thing that we have over the computer is, like, we are creative beings. We can create out of nowhere. The computer only does what it learns. Right? It can only take the sum of everything it learned and then move it around, but it can't actually create new content. Any new content it creates is amalgamation of stuff that you trained it on. Right? It's not actually able to create like a new genre, like Miles Davis creating fusion from coming out of bebop. It won't do that. It won't create something that didn't exist. So it just amalgamates things, and so that's the one thing that we always have. And once you remember that, like, we're the ones that do that, like we have that creation capability. That's going to give us the edge no matter what.
The more I look into this, I'm not technical at all, so I don't know all the tech language and all this stuff. But I do remember when computers first came out, they were kind of large and slow and cumbersome to navigate through. Can you imagine that as your brain? And then fast forward to today with AI, but you're still operating the software from when computers were first brought out. Can you imagine what that space would look like and what you would have limitations on creating. I mean, it blows my mind. But yet, that's how most of us run our lives. We run our lives from the computer programming from the ages of 1 to 8. So just think about it. From the ages of 1 to 8, your mom and dad, whatever was going on in the house, whatever stress they were dealing with, whatever pressures of life, whatever crucible they were in, they created an environment that was stressful, full of anxiety, screaming, yelling, whatever the case may be. You were put into school, and school gave you stars if you obeyed. School gave you, the attaboys if you did certain things a certain way. Raise your hand. Don't talk unless you're spoken to. I mean, we just get so programmed with all of the ways that we handle our emotion. Taking that into consideration and knowing that that's the 70 or the 95% of our brain that works subconsciously or on autopilot, if we can tap into that and change that subconscious mind to think differently, to ask different questions, we could literally change the direction and course of our lives. So I heard it like this. It's kind of interesting. It says, you will never be consistent with anything in life that is inconsistent with your subconscious programs. So, I mean, just think about it. You will never be consistent in life with anything that's inconsistent with your subconscious program. So what does that tell you about your subconscious program? If you're not consistent with what you see out in the world, that's because your subconscious mind is not in alignment with what you think you want to do. So to get those two in alignment, you got to actually go back in, look at the subconscious mind, look at those programs, and then find out, why did I get programmed this way? Why can I not change that now? And then just go in there and change the narrative, change the stories. And for me, I had to go back in and change the paradigm with my mother, with my father. And I grew up, I had a wonderful childhood. I really did. My dad was a preacher. They both got married at very young ages. My mother came from an alcoholic environment growing up, and she was only 17 when she had me. And so I had a lot of responsibility growing up. When my dad became a preacher, people were looking at me under the microscope and then challenging and testing my parents and evaluating them based off of my actions. So if I did anything wrong, it was an indictment against my father, who was the preacher. He should have had control over me. So it caused me to grow up hiding a lot. So I would do things and I wouldn't let people know. So I was a hypocrite. I lived the life of a hypocrite. I lived a life one way on the week, and then when I went to church on Sunday, I was a totally different person, because I had to be in order to suffice the expectations of the congregation, who put so much emphasis on behavior.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're kind of just putting a lot of pressure for you to kind of be in that paradigm.
So I had to go back and rechange. I had to change that narrative. And when I did, Matt and I look at it, and man, I don't hold my father accountable for any of it anymore. I was in competition with him for the longest time. I mean, it was just that we have a lot of baggage that we interpret life through, that was nothing more than interpreting life through the lens of fear. And that fear, it made an indelible mark on our psyche and our subconscious. And then that program has now just run every aspect of our life. And we all have the power to change that, because we were born to change that. We were born with the empowerment of being created. Just the fact that we were created, now we get to create in our lives. Yeah, and when we understand that, life becomes an adventure. What else can I create? Who can I help? Who can I help create an environment for them and their families? And that's where I get so much passion and power today, is that now I get to help other men create the environment for the marriage of their dreams. How do you take a marriage from I hate you, I hate God, I hate the church, I quit, to you are the most amazing man in my life. I love you with all my heart, with all my mind, and with all my soul. That my wife's love for me today is undeniable. Why? Because I changed who I showed up to be. I have men tell me all the time, but you don't understand. Your wife gave you grace. That's great. My wife will never give me grace. You don't know my wife. You don't know what she's done. You don't know what she said to me. You don't know how bad I've treated her. What, yada, 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 whatever that case may be. And I totally understand it and I empathize with it. But here's what the reality is. Man, if your wife is looking at you through the lens of hostility, anger, resentment, bitterness, that's because that's how you've shown up in life. Hostile, bitter, angry. So she is now reflecting how you show up.
Yeah,
she reflects that to you to give you the proof and the evidence that you need to support your subconscious programs that say, I'm angry, I'm bitter, I'm resentment. Life is that. Look at what she's doing. See, she's proving to me that I'm worthless. She's proving to me that I hope. See, she's doing this to me. She's proving that my subconscious is right. So in that respect, you're absolutely, I can't change that. You're absolutely 100% right. Your wife will never change. She will always show up. She will always be that for you. But what if you had the power to change how you show up in the present moment and turn the dial from the negative polarity up more towards a positive polarity? And instead of showing up fearful, you show up loving. You show up compassionate. You show up understanding. You show up with empathy and understanding. What if that's how you showed up for your wife? What if you showed up for your wife as the essence of being love? In other words, there's 3 layers of relationship. Relationship on the first layer is it's all about me. It's a self-centered, egotistical driven life. Some could call it even narcissism, but it's all about me. The second layer is it's a win-win. It's a 50-50. You give, I'll give. It's more of a contractual agreement. And that's where most of us live our lives in relationship. It's under the contract of you do your part, I'll do my part. But hey, the minute you stop doing your part, I'm going to stop doing my part. Well, that just becomes nothing more than the minute I interpret that you're not pulling your weight, I'm going to get angry and upset. And now there's going to be conflict. That's the quote unquote, the win-win of relationship. But there's a third level of relationship that is about the essence of being, love, which means that you show up in the relationship this way. Your need is my need. Can you imagine the type of attraction you would have in a relationship if you showed up in that relationship with your need is my need, and I will do everything to meet that need in a powerful, powerful way? What if that's the transition of life? That's the transition of the mindset, is how we show up. Do you think your wife would be more attracted to you if you showed up to her in the essence of being love, in the essence of being compassionate, in the essence of being understanding, in the essence of being a contributor to her well-being, rather than to be sucking that life out of her through anger, bitterness, and resentment? What woman, I would like to know from your audience, what woman would not want a man who showed up in her life as the essence of unconditional love? Not judgment, not criticism, not condemnation, but the essence of love, the essence of grace, and the essence of forgiving the unforgivable. Man, you talk about changing the paradigm shift of man's life. It's all in our court, in how we choose to show up in our everyday life, for ourselves first and then for our spouse. What a difference. I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed that change in relationship when men and women finally take on the responsibility that they are responsible for the condition of that relationship. And when they show up differently, things change. When I change, everything around me changes. That's the power of the mind. That's the power of the paradigm shift.
Well, it's empowerment and transformational, less transactional.
Yeah, the transactional part is that's where we're all stuck in life. Everything's a transaction.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like our capitalist mindset. I don't like to put down the system, but like if you look at everything as a transaction, then you tend to get this mindset. It's all profit loss. It's all black and white. You don't see the grays. You don't see the you don't have empathy. It's like, oh, it's like if it's not making a profit, just get rid of it. And so it's like, but sometimes like it's not all about profit. It's like it's not all about the value. It's about the value of something. Like it's like not the cost of something, right? So it's like sometimes something might have a monetary value, but like the real value is that it actually lifts somebody up, and maybe that you can't put a price tag. You didn't make a profit lifting somebody up, but it actually has a lot of power in society when you do that.
No, I mean that is absolutely correct, and I can prove it to you even further. Just think about it. I mean, everybody that's listening to this podcast right now, I want you to just close your eyes and think about this. Think of the one person that has changed your life more than any person alive for the better. Just think about that. Maybe it was a family member. Maybe it was a teacher in school. Maybe it was, a friend of yours, somebody who poured so much into you, had so much confidence, had so much admiration for you that it changed who you are. We all can point our finger to at least one person like that in our lives. And when you do, what are your thoughts? What do you think about? You think about their love. You think about their understanding. You think about their compassion. You think about how they communicated with you at that level. And what does that make you want to do? Run from it or attract to it? I guarantee it. Every time we're going to be attracted to it. So husbands, show up as that person and watch what happens to your wife. You can change me. My life was confined to this identity that I was a serial betrayer with prostitutes. And my wife hated me, God, and the church. I quit. You can't get any more fractured than that. It just can't happen. It's just that is where we were. So how do you respond when you've been told that from your wife? You can point the finger and say, well, you did this and you said that and you acted this way. So F you. And we call that hall sex. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but a lot of couples have hall sex. And hall sex is when one person screams down the hallway, F you. And the other one out the other end of the hallway says, no, F you. That's called hall sex. And that's where a lot of relationships end and destroy their relationships because they don't know how to communicate from a different place of showing up in life. And that's all it is. And it's not a condemnation or a judgment against them. Heck, I was there. I've been there. I know what it feels like. And all of us go through it. But that's because we were running the programs of our adolescence, of our subconscious, and we haven't been able to change the narrative so that we can be consistent with the pre-programs of our subconscious so that we can now be in alignment to move forward in a positive way.
Well, I think we can end there because we always end up hitting the hour faster than we ever imagined. But we do have your Instagram below that people can connect with you there. And that will be fully clickable on Instagram /Ricky CAFD. And that's clickable on all the platforms that we're on. We're recently on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And people can go check that out. We will be on all the other podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by the end of the day today. And I want to thank you for being on the show.
Is it possible to say one other thing, Fana, before we go?
Yeah.
You can also get a hold of me at rickcheatham.com. That's my website, rickcheatham.com. Okay. And from there, it will give you the links to Facebook, Instagram, and I just started a YouTube channel. So this old codger is starting to get up into the technology fields of YouTube even. So I will have a content that will be posted up there as well. And that'll all be on my website.
Okay, well, we'll include that on when we publish to a wider area, and I'll add that back into the platforms we've already been on. But Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Phantom.
Thank you. Have a great day.